Hey guys, what's going on? Paul here. Welcome back to another Cardano video. Not just specifically Cardano today, but a very important topic when it comes to cryptocurrency, and that is security. I've got an expert with me here today, Kyle from Epoch SEC. Very welcome. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
So look, I suppose we're going to cover a lot of different topics. You have your project where you're helping out with security, bringing awareness about that. We're going to cover all of that. We're also going to cover kind of common things with teams, things that might be missed or things that they should concentrate on. We'll talk about Ledger, the week that is in it with what has happened. I'll get your opinion on that. You will know a lot more than me. Maybe we'll try and finish up with the advice you would give to new people, security, maybe your top three. So I will put timestamps below for anyone, but to kick into it first, can you give an introduction to yourself and then we'll get into your project and everything then?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting from the very beginning, and I'll keep it kind of short, but I spent 13 years in the U.S. Navy, and out of that came an opportunity to get into cybersecurity. So coincidentally, I've actually been in cybersecurity for a little over 13 years at this point as well. So about 26 years between the military and cybersecurity, and so that's my general background, and then my background in terms of the crypto and Cardano community. I joined the community probably effectively about two and a half years ago, and over time, I've just becoming more involved. So I know in my name, I am Kyle and Epoch SEC, but in terms of the community facing, I'm also most commonly known as Holy Macaronee. But that's my quick rough background.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to put that name in. That's the name that lots of people probably seen you around Twitter or Discord, and you're very active in a lot of different areas. So that's the name people probably click with first, and Kyle nearly comes second at this stage.
Yeah.
Well, actually, completely out there. Where did that name come from, or why Holy Macaroni?
Yeah, it's not a mind blowing, but probably 20 years ago, me and my best friend really started gaming a lot in my early 20s. That's pretty much all I do with my life is game. And so we were gaming all the time, and one day something happened, and I just screamed out "Holy Macaroni," and he probably laughed the rest of the evening about that. So I thought, well, that's a good name to try to stick with. So it's just kind of been my catch name I've always used in anything. Yeah.
Nice. It's a good introduction for people, and it's something that people remember. It's the name
Yeah.
stands out to people. So look, you're working on a project at the minute, Epoch SEC. Can you give us not a project? I'll let you talk about it. What is Epoch SEC and what you're trying to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it technically is a project from the perspective of Catalyst. So let me just run through it for everybody. So about a year and a half ago, actually about 10 years ago, I thought of the name Epoch Sec, period, right? I was already in security. I really liked, Greek and Roman history, and I liked how you called all the periods epochs, and they had the pillars and all. So the name Epoch Sec's really always been there, but I didn't know how to use it. So about a year and a half ago, I really started thinking, how could I be more active in the Cardano community? I'm very active in the Cardano community, but how can I put in my part, right? How can I help people? I can't sit here and write some smart contracts for people all day long. I'm not going to help code the blockchain, but what can I do? So I think, well, I'm in cybersecurity. I have a lot of experience in there. People get scammed all the time. Let me apply my skills. But what I didn't want to do is have to go through the hurdle every time, and the sometimes roadblock and challenge of saying, hey, Bob or Nancy or team or A or B, you know I you know I want to be, everybody wants to be, uh they want to be compensated for their time, right? So I said, well, I don't want to deal with that thing between teams and individuals right now. I just want to help people. So I figured, well, the Catalyst, going through Catalyst would be a good approach or an opportunity. So I went through Catalyst. I wrote a proposal that was approved by the community, and then I got funded that way. So now, I'm funded through Catalyst. Now I don't have to deal with that hurdle. Now I just help out teams. So that's the whole idea behind Epoch Sec, but it is more than a project. It is a goal and a sincere, important thing for me, because I'm like everybody, right? I'm tired of just continuously seeing people getting scammed and compromised. So if I can give people the tools and knowledge to better protect themselves. If I help one person at a time, I feel like that's been successful. So, if I just help one person here and there being prevented from getting compromised, I think I'm making progress. So I'm going off track there, but that's just the overall idea and the mentality behind what I'm doing with Epoch SEC.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's a great use of Catalyst. It allows you to put a base information out there for people. You do have websites, you host different spaces. I know you interact with teams individually too. So I'll put the links to all of that below. There'll be a lot of resources there for people. I think the Twitter spaces you do are generally on different areas that people can look into, expanding on them. And what, I suppose I'm getting into it, but what have you done so far in the project?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, if you just want to say it, then I'll just sit here.
No. Bringing guests on is great. I get to sit back and let them do the talking.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. So, what I've done so far, and I'll walk through it in a certain way. So, I originally started the project back last October, where I built the website and really started developing the plan and all of that. And by the way, if you all go to my website, it is functional and it's easy to find information. I'm not a website developer, so don't give me a hard time on that. But it is very useful. But anyway, so I started out by saying, hey, I'll have a website. I also have Gitbook as well, if people prefer that. But I'll start out by creating some documentation and hosting a handful of Twitter spaces every week to do two things: really spread the awareness of what I'm doing, but really just to provide my time and block off my time for anybody that needs help, right? And that worked really well. I had a lot of people joining in. I met a bunch of new people just that had quick questions about something they were trying to do with 2FA, two-factor authentication, or maybe they were looking to get into cybersecurity, and I kind of minimally mentored them, that kind of thing. So it's a broad spectrum. But I did that in lieu of, I knew that eventually the project would pick up in other aspects as I was hoping it would. And that was the first thing would be meetings, right? So individual, I guess you can call them consultations, but that's not really a fun word. But basically what I would do, what started to tick up was I would have private sessions with individuals in the community as well as teams that needed security advice. And it can be anything across the entire spectrum of security. So that started to tick up. So I slowed down on the Twitter spaces. I will always maintain one of those. That's the point. But I wanted to slow down on that and tick up on the meetings. So that happened. So over time, over a couple of months throughout the end of 2022, I started meeting with 4 or 5 different teams and 4 or 5 individuals. A couple of months after that, I think at this point I'm up to probably a dozen different teams and 2-3 dozen individuals of just individual focused time with them. I've probably talked to hundreds of people through my Twitter spaces and things like that, though. So long story short, I start off Twitter spaces. I tuned that down to 1 per week. My meetings started ticking up, and my documentation, I am now just providing the documentation when I think it makes sense for the topic. But I'm also doing a YouTube channel now as well, where I basically have gotten into a cadence now to where I have a specific topic each week that I do a YouTube video on. I cover the topic also through Cardano over coffee, a little 5-minute segment on Friday on a Twitter space. And then I run my dedicated Twitter space with the help of some people in the community on Sundays. So video, documentation, if applicable, Twitter space on Sunday. So I've gotten into a kind of a fluid rotation with that. And I'm just I'm very excited about how this will continue to evolve and what it'll be. And I'm kind of at that point now where I really need to start deciding, what those next steps are, if the fluid motions I'm going through right now make sense, or if I need to, continue developing and changing gears or what have you. I don't know if I just started going off a track there, but I hope that helped.
It sounds like a very busy schedule anyway, with you've got a lot going on, we'll say.
Yeah.
So what are you've talked to a lot of teams, and I'm not looking for names or anything like that, but what are some of the common oversights maybe that teams have, or projects or things that they should be looking for initially that sometimes don't look into?
Yeah, I think, and there, and by the way, anybody that wants to go to Lido Nation or the Catalyst, documentation or anything like that. I'm extremely transparent about who I do meet with and talk to. I don't put exact details of what I talk to them about, though, right? Rightfully
Mhm.
so. But you know, I've talked to a lot of teams. I mean, I'm currently in routine things with, you know, Indigo, not really a fluid token, just whoever wants my help. It doesn't, you know, if they're doing something, I'm going to help them because you know, it's important for them to be safe so that they protect their users and the community, right? But anyway, um, some things that and this is not specific to any of the people I've met with. It's just over my 13 years, generally, what do I see people miss? And I think the first thing is someone builds a team, and they allocate all of their funding to, you know, development, marketing, things like that, uh, and then the security doesn't get any funding, and that might just be oversight from excitement of doing the other things, or sometimes it's just the funding strictly isn't there because small teams really don't have a lot of money to begin with, right? um, so they kind of get into a bind of, what do I do? I don't have any money for security. So what comes along with that is then security sometimes gets put to the wayside. So if I think that might behoove teams to think about that earlier on in the process. Totally get that money is limited, right? Especially in a bear market if you're in a crypto company, right? Um, but just try to think about that. And there's a lot of things you can do where you really don't need a lot of money. I've actually done videos on some of those things. But you know, they can look at open source, you know, solutions. So if you're looking for something to detect, for a layman's way of putting it, if you're looking to detect threats in your environment, you might want something called an EDR solution. But you don't have to go pay $50,000 for it. You can look at something called Open EDR. You know, there are, if you're looking at authentication methods, you can look at Okta. Okta has a free tier service, I think, of up to 25 employees or users and limited functionality, but it'll get you started. And that kind of gets to my second point, where I think a lot of teams usually get into the scenario of how to move forward with security. Um, and a lot of times teams I get questions all of the time throughout my entire career about, well, how do I get all of these tools out there now? What tools do I buy and how do I get them deployed today? And I think there's two problems with that. I think, and why they need to take a step back. The first thing is, not all, you really need your security strategy and plan in order to decide what tools you need to help you get there. I don't need all of these security appliances and then decide what to do with them, right? Furthermore, I think the other challenge with that is that they're under the false assumption that they need to do all of these things right now. And while it would be great to do that, I think a better approach is to slowly evolve your security strategy. So look at your two high profile things and say, I need to do these couple of things, and then do them. And then look at these couple of things, then do them correctly and continue that. The last thing I would say is, I think that the other thing that teams sometimes miss is having someone, or nobody, in whatever capacity it is, not being aware of the threats out there that they are susceptible to. So there's two different things to do. One is looking at threats in general, just historical recent threats, but also look at what is specific to your business sector. Healthcare and banking industries are extremely susceptible to data harvesting and ransomware. You know, crypto teams are extremely susceptible to just annoying attacks like DDoS attacks to try to bring down your application, or compromising user wallets, things like that. So think about those and how you might preemptively prevent that. And then also think about historical attacks in other business sectors and how that might apply to you one day. For instance, I deal with ransomware cases all of the time. I work with forensics teams all of the time, and everything you see in the news, there's a good chance I've helped with that situation. But what I don't see happening right now is a lot of ransomware cases in crypto. Maybe they are, maybe I just don't have the exposure to it. But the point is, they could be a real thing one day for crypto companies. If I could compromise you and get some money out of you by putting ransomware on your stuff, why wouldn't I do it? I don't care that you're a crypto company, right? So I think people need to think about that as well.
Yeah, I suppose within crypto, a lot of people look at security as just, does the team have an audit? Was the audit passed? And take that as security. And one audit doesn't catch everything. We've seen this even in Cardano with MinSwap. Their initial audit didn't catch certain parts. Luckily, when they open sourced the contracts, it was another company that was able to find some of the issues in it and were able to report that. So we say white hat hackers versus black hat. And I think there's more and more black hat out there now that are trying to exploit and try and take funds for themselves. We see it across crypto with contracts getting exploited, and it's getting dangerous out there for funds. One thing with security, even outside of teams, is that a lot of times people don't care about security until it's too late. I've put out different blog posts and videos about kind of generally practices that I use or practices I think are good, and they're generally some of the lowest performing or lowest watch videos until something happens and people go looking then what they should have done. But I'd say you find that too. I will put links to all your stuff down below. I would highly encourage people to go through the YouTube channel. I've checked it out as well. And the videos are generally shorter videos, straight to the point. I would say that's definitely something people should look at. And towards the end of this, I'm going to get your top, I suppose, top points for people. But across the space right now, what do you see are the most common issues for the general user, the things that they fall susceptible to?
I think the number one thing is, and this is not going to be mind blowing, but it's just being phished and socially engineered. This is now phishing and social engineering has been around since since the dinosaurs, right? But it's even more so prevalent in our space, right? Why? The thing about bad actors
Sorry, just to
is
interrupt you.
opportunity.
Take a step back. Can you tell people what socially engineered is, just for people that mightn't have heard the term
Absolutely.
before?
Yeah, so socially engineering is using a handful of different tactics. So let's break it down like that. They might use fear, right? They might want to give you fear. They might want to, give you a sense of urgency. They might want to try to employ a tactic to, make you excited about something, make you think you're getting something for free, for nothing, right? That kind of thing. So what they're trying to do is, get on, try to do one of those things to get you to do something quickly before you have time to think about it. And or unknowing to you, you might click a link or something like that. If they say, hey, your bank account's going to dissolve if you don't click this link and fix your problem, or if you click this, I'll give you 50 million of this thing, but all you have to do is send me 20 million first, that kind of thing. So they'll try these tactics to get you to do something to compromise you. And they, like I said, the sense of urgency is a very common technique employed most of the time to trick you into doing something. And now that's where phishing comes in, because phishing is, a lot of people mix those up a lot of the times, right? But phishing is trying to get you to click on something, and you don't, you might think that thing is real, but it is malicious. It might be a simple hyperlink to where the URL might be xyz.com, but the hyperlink says ABC, right? And I just don't have a better example right now, but that's what they'll do. They'll try to then get you to click on that thing, and then they might have an obfuscated website that might look like the real website, but in reality, it's doing something completely different behind the scenes that you don't know what it's doing. And by the time that happens, it's too late, and you're already compromised.
Yeah, I suppose we see that with Discords getting hacked or new moderators getting access, and you see links posted into the announcements. And part of that is to try and get people to click on that link so that they can either phish them, get some information from them, or they talk about airdrops and things like that. Generally, if you're following a project and you see all of a sudden they post links about this magic airdrop that's happening for the first X number of people, don't click the link at all. If you have clicked the link, make sure you go in, you follow up to find out of other trusted people, what did that link do? Did it give them access to anything? Maybe you need to scrub your browsers, your cookies, maybe your whole laptop, depending on what the actual link was. But that'd be one of the more common ones that you see out there, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that it's extremely common. And yeah, it generally starts from something like that from a phishing and social engineering technique. Even furthermore, most of the, just as a broader example, when I deal with ransomware cases or forensics cases, everybody sees in the news that big company A got ransomware. Well, they don't know that that usually starts off by one of their employees being phished or socially engineered, right? So it can happen to you as a personal situation, or in your job or wherever. It's extremely common, extremely the number one most common attack vector there is. Yeah.
Yeah, so easy. Just a simple click, and even people sending you downloads, attachments. And if as soon as you download that to your computer and it opens up, it can install all sorts on your computer. Never, I would say, never download anything from someone you don't know or you don't trust. Even people you do trust, be wary. Their emails could be compromised. And sometimes you see that with big newsletters or people getting companies getting exploited, and they get access to their email database and information is sent out. Ledger is one that their buyer list got exploited last year or the year before, where people got access to all of the people who had bought ledgers. They got their phone numbers, their email address, their actual address of their houses. Those people getting threats and everything. So people, they were targeted through actual threats, through phone calls saying, we know where your address is, but also on the email side, and people coming out and saying, there's a new update for Ledger, you need to install this. And those ones out there that had firmware that could exploit the actual hardware device. So they pretended to be Ledger, even had websites up, and people went in, and then if they put that on, all of their funds were gone. And so that leads us into Ledger. Been an interesting week for Ledger. I don't know how they didn't see the kickback coming from this. I know there are certain very smart people out there who have went through it now and said it's not as bad as people thought initially. I've given my opinions on it on other calls. Summarize, I think they shouldn't have done this on old devices. This probably for newer people coming into crypto that don't trust managing the keys themselves, there might be a use case there, but you do this on a different device. You don't put this onto older devices, where one of the key things for Ledger was they used to say the private keys never leave the device. Now they've changed that to say, oh, they could always leave the device. It was just a firmware update to change that, which is scary for people. But from a security perspective, what's your view on the whole Ledger situation?
Yeah. So it's I have a lot of thoughts. I'll keep it brief for this. I did actually do like a little 15-minute video as well, like everybody else, but I try to really just do it to give people a perspective. So, but so back to the question. I think it's strictly from a security perspective. Well, maybe not, right? I even have an opinion like everybody else about how they communicated. I think the biggest problem that they had was the way that they communicated it. Even if it wasn't abrupt, I think that the general sentiment was that it felt like it was abrupt and just thrown at them. I think also, they did a Twitter space later that day, and you know, admittedly, I wasn't there for the entire Twitter space, but while I was there, what I did hear was an evolving or changing answer or opinion from the Ledger team. It started off, like you said, right, as there's a new feature, but this new feature has no new attack vector. Then it started to evolve in, well, if you do enable this, then sure. That's actually, in my opinion, still a false, just not accurate, because you just don't know until something is compromised. If there is the ability in the code to do something, if there's a function in there, there is the potential for that to be compromised. Sometimes we may not even know that until the bad actor has already done it, right? That's usually the case. So I think there's two things. The way they communicated it didn't sit well with me. I think I would have definitely done that a lot different. And it could have just been maybe their business leadership was on a different page than their technical folks. There's plenty of reasons for that, and surely reasonable. But back to the security part of it, I think if I tell you you can, in this code you can do this thing, then a bad actor can take advantage of that. Maybe that bad actor can enable that feature for you. Maybe they found a way to do that, right? And I've seen other security experts that I know pen testers and people like that have given a good thought on it as well, where we don't now, we're at the point now to where, because of the point that you made, this thing could have always been in that firmware, just not activated, so to speak. So now there's a trust factor. You know, one thing that Ledger doesn't have open source is their firmware. So now we're at a point in the conversation. Now people are advocating for open sourcing that, so that we can actually verify, because a lot of people lost trust in that. So they want to verify. They want the community to verify that code themselves now, right? So I think in general, I mean, those are my couple of points about it, if you will.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing is that a firmware update is all it takes to allow the keys to be exported, where they used to always make a huge point about where your private key can never leave the device. But now the fact that it is only a firmware away is what's which is what is worrying lots of people out there. I know there's people say, oh, you have to opt in, that everyone's taking it too far and exaggerating what's possible. But as you said there, it is, once you put the possibility there, then there's a lot of people out there that can try to exploit this. And even if it is an opt-in feature where you have to sign something on the device to export the seed phrase or the private key, then you could be signing a contract. There could be phishing websites set up out there where you think you're on Uniswap or you're on something else. You go to sign a contract, and potentially, now I don't know if it will be done or it could be done, but potentially you could be signing a contract to say you want to do a swap. But in the back end, what it's doing is actually enabling that on the ledger. And lots of people, they do a transaction, you fly through the screens on the ledger, you don't actually read what's there. Some will, lots of people won't, and you could end up confirming that and potentially export your keys at some point. So for me, that's the big risk there, that once it's a small possibility of it, then there's lots of, unfortunately, very smart people out there that will try and exploit it. But would you keep using a ledger now, or would you move to something like Trezor? Or maybe you weren't using ledger anyway, but it's one that I used to always tell people. I haven't got it sitting here, but I used to always show when I was talking about security was, make sure you get a hardware wallet, and it was generally a ledger that I was showing.
Yeah, I think, you know, and there's the other idea going around about maybe they should have made this a completely separate product line, right? For the people that want to maintain the true idea of a hardware wallet and the people that want that feature, right? Two different product lines. That might be a reasonable solution. But would I still use it? I don't know. I think I might still use it, but I think you know, because of my experience, you know, I potentially be a little more safe about it, because I know I know, you know, I'm much more acutely aware of my potential risk there. But in general, I'll say this: I wouldn't use the feature. I would not recommend anybody to use the feature, for one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be my end answer there. But I would say look at the other devices, because I don't know for sure, Paul, but I think it's only their Ledger Nano X that will have that. But, you know, even further to some points we've already made, we don't know for sure that that's not a thing in the S or any other device they'll have, right? So probably not use the Ledger, but if you do, definitely don't enable the feature and make it easier on a bad actor.
Yeah, I have the majority of my funds sitting on a Ledger Nano S. I actually bought a 3-pack recently that I had planned to revamp all of my cold storage and split it up, and some for the kids for long term and stuff like that. So now I'm thinking, now do I go out and buy a new one? I know for now the firmware isn't coming on to the Nano S, so I'm not in any major panic. And anyone watching this or any of the other stuff on Ledger, there is no immediate need to rush out and try and get a new device or get your crypto off right now, but do look into it and make up your own mind. I do have a Nano X. I won't be installing that firmware until I look a lot more into this, and probably won't install it. Like you say, I personally wouldn't recommend the feature for anyone either. If you are not happy managing your own keys, then use some trusted centralized custodian. I know FTX and certain ones like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ones that have been here long term, look at Coinbase. They offer custodianship. There is third party custody. They will handle your funds, and they're not actually an exchange, or they have a part of their company that isn't part of the exchange. So if you want someone else to manage your keys, that's what I would say to look into, rather than using a feature like this on a ledger. So I'm going to ask you, before we get close to finishing up, your top 3 tips for people coming into crypto. They're new, they haven't done much on security. So these could be on their own device, on things they should use, or what would be the top 3 they should look into?
Yeah, I'm going to do that. But one thing I wanted to close up on the ledger thing with, I wanted to make sure I close up on a point there. No matter what, when you are deciding, what everybody needs to do is make an individual decision on your risk tolerance and what you're willing to accept from a security perspective, along with availability perspective, right? So what I recommend is not what you should do. It's what you should take into account with multiple sources of information and knowledge to then decide what you should do, right? I think that's probably the most important thing there to mention. And the other thing I wanted to mention about potential attack vectors is not just the firmware and the feature and the functionality. The 3 custodians or entities holding parts of this encrypted phrase, they could be socially engineered as well. That is absolutely another threat vector or an attack vector, right? So being socially engineered.
Yeah,
But
that's
anyway,
actually
moving
a
on.
good point. Just on, we see what AI can do now and how deepfakes, how real they are. It's I wouldn't trust things to my KYC right now. It's a scary world what they can do out there right now. But sorry, I cut you off there. I think you were going to go into the next part.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the 3 things that I think are key for users. First thing, if I had just give 3 recommendations maybe and nothing more, because I have tons of recommendations. Just go watch all of my stuff. But the three main ones. Don't ever click anything. Someone asked me that one time. They laughed at it when I said that. But if you're not, just don't click anything. Even if your best friend sends you something. And Paul, I think you mentioned this earlier, but even if my best friend sent me a link of something they found out about, I don't know that they weren't potentially compromised or socially engineered as well, right? So I'm not going to click that link. I always go to the source every single time. And sometimes, even if you go to the source, you still need to be careful. You don't know that that source wasn't compromised as well, right? So, but anyway, always go to the source for information and don't just click links that people send you, no matter who they are. Go to the source. And then if you go to the source and something doesn't seem right, start looking into that. Maybe go look up that website on other things, Google Safe Browsing or who.is, and find out where they're registered, things like that. But just don't click anything. Now, the next one would be to have your right thought process. So I talk a whole lot about things you can do, 2-factor authentication or securing your operating system or using different tools to find out if something's malicious or not. But I think the most important tool for someone to have is the right thought process on how you approach any social interaction. That will go a long way in helping prevent you from ever being compromised. It's done me very well over time. So what I mean by that is having your approach of when someone messages you on whatever social media, if you see a new project or a team or application or company come out with something, you don't just jump right into that thing. You start doing your research, even if it's about to launch and you're about to miss some good opportunity. There's a phrase I always use: I'd rather miss 9 out of 10, every 10 good opportunities, versus getting compromised 1 out of 100 times, right? So I'd rather miss the majority of good opportunities versus just getting compromised once out of all of my historical social media activity. But going back to, like, if somebody messages me or sends me an email or a social media direct message or anything like that, I absolutely never respond immediately. I look at who they are. I look at who they communicated with, how they communicate. I look at if we share any contacts in common. If Discord, I look at if we share any servers in common. Twitter, I look if we share any followers in common, all these different things, right? So I'm looking at a handful of different things to come to a corroborated decision on if I trust that person or not before I ever interact with them. So things like that, just having the right thought. So don't click anything, having the right thought process, and then also being more actively aware of securing your stuff. So it's easy for me to go create a Twitter account. It takes a little more work to get into that Twitter account and set up, Google Authenticator or YubiKey, or turn off set different settings in Twitter where they're collecting information or sharing information. It takes more legwork to do that. But I think every time you do something new, you create an account on a website, or you create a social media account, or you interact with something, take the time to look at what their settings are and what you can do to improve your security.
Yeah, I think they're very important. And just when you mentioned 2FA there, one thing as well that I tell people a lot is to enable 2FA, and don't do SMS 2FA, because of your phone number can get hacked. People can get control of that. But recently there was an update made to Google 2FA as well, where now you can sync your 2FA across all your devices, which sounds like a really nice, handy feature to use, but emails get hacked a lot. So if you are signing up and using Google 2FA, my opinion, I can't give advice on it, would be don't use the one that you associated with a certain email address. I know it's very handy if you lose it or anything like that, but it could be detrimental if your email gets hacked. All of a sudden, they can log into your exchanges using your email, and then they have your 2FA. They can restore that easily. So even if you have 2FA on the exchange, they can get in doing that way. So don't always go for the easy route, is what I would say. Sometimes they make it so easy to get all these backups and everything. And you mentioned YubiKey. That is one that I would highly recommend, is even if not YubiKey, yep, a hardware. And what that is 2FA. But you can see on this, there's a little, you probably can't see it properly on the camera, but there's a little point that when I go to log in, I have to put in a code, and then I also have to touch that. So I have to have physical access to this device to log into. I use it for exchanges, you can use it for social platforms. You can use it for a lot of different stuff. And I can't even remember how much they are. I bought a 2-pack to have one as a backup and one as my main one, maybe a year or 2 years ago. And they can be a lifesaver.
The one that you have, I think, has NFC or near field communication.
Yeah.
So that is, I think that's like $65 or $75. The one I just bought is the 5C, which doesn't have that, but I do the same thing where I just touch the side of it, right?
Okay.
If you guys can see it. But yeah, this one was $55. I think that's a very well spent $55.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I got this one at the time was because of my phone. I wanted to log into certain things with the phone, and you can hold it up to the back of your phone and it can use that as the security key for there. Well, look, I do appreciate your time. I hope this video, if it even saves one person getting hacked, it was well worth the time. Anyone watching, please do share it out. I'm sure people can pick up lots of different tips. And even if you only pick up one or two, then it's definitely worth it. Kyle, any closing thoughts for us or anything? I'll put all your links down below, and I would recommend people go subscribe to your YouTube channel, take a look at the different content coming out. And any closing thoughts from yourself?
Just practice. I would say two things. Just it doesn't take a lot of time to add just a little bit of security to what you're doing. So every time you're doing something, just start. I would challenge everybody just to add a few minutes of time to whatever they're doing for specifically looking at security, just slowly, gradually improving your security. I'm not suggesting that you spend the next week trying to become a cybersecurity expert. Just spend a few minutes additional what you're already doing to improve that security. Finally, and most importantly, I truly and sincerely appreciate anybody listening to this, and Paul, your time that you took out of your day to do this with me. It means a lot. And yeah, like Paul said, thanks for listening. Yeah,
look, Kyle, I appreciate your time. I know from even going through this, you are a busy man, so it's great to get this information out there. Anyone new, do subscribe. Cover a lot of different Cardano content, and maybe at different times we can, if there is some big security events happening in crypto or big hacks or something, maybe we could do a follow-up, Kyle, to get your opinion on it as one of the experts in the field. Thanks for watching, guys. Do appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.